Okay, I think we're live. I hope everyone can hear me okay. And welcome to a fun one. Galactic friends, Archons, Demiurge. What is it all? It's a lovely topic, actually. I really enjoy this topic. Before I get into all of the things that I'm going to share, I just want to say, of course, take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is just my experience of these forces and what I've come to understand about them so far. Everything I say is true as far as I know, as far as and I'll try to be clear if it's just a theory or something. Most of what I say will I'm attempting to be true about. The higher truth of things. At the same time, because we're in duality and speaking in language, of course, that's not entirely possible for me to do that. So thank you so much for joining, first of all. Thank you. Glory to you, dear soul. Let's talk first about consciousness evolution a little bit. So in our experience right now, in humans in general, uncertainty and unknownness is confusing and freaky for us because we are very mind oriented. This means that we essentially perceive enemies everywhere. Anything that we're like not sure about, we perceive an enemy. So the first thing I wanted to get into was what the Demiurge is, what it's said to be. First, I guess we'll say it's said to be a creator being that created the manifest world that we experience, the material, physical universe itself, the entirety of it. Hey E, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. Please leave comments, chat, and all that stuff, questions, whatever is interesting. As soon as I get through some of the intro stuff, then we'll get into some of that and freestyle a bit, I guess. So thank you so much for joining. So it's the creator being that claims to be the creator of all matter. On the material world. Essentially, the story goes that the child of Sophia, Yaldabaoth, is the name generally, which some also tie to Yahweh. I'm not sure about that myself. I'm still investigating these things. But this was a jealous and a vengeful god, right? A god that wanted to claim power and authority over the creation. What we need to learn as beings here is that these concepts are symbolic. The people that were writing them, the prophets that were writing them in symbolism to distill revelations to the mind, to the psyche. So the archonic forces, or archonic forces in the Demiurge is representative of our idolatry of the material world. Oh, am I dropping frames? I'm getting a YouTube error. Can you guys let me know in chat if things are going okay? So these are aspects of ourselves, basically, right? So the Demiurge, hopefully you guys can see and hear. I'm just going to keep going, I guess. I can't see any issue with the stream on my side, so I think it's okay. I don't know. But it's essentially a symbolic concept for aspects of consciousness that we experience. So when we are idolizing, and it all ties into this concept that the archonic forces only can really manipulate the identity or egoic aspect of self. Thank you, Prince of Peace. Thank you for letting me know. I don't know what's going on. I'm getting a weird thing. As soon as I start talking about, you know, ooh, what's going on? I'm getting like a yellow caution sign. It's so funny. But the there's this concept that there's somehow an enemy to fight that the human like really holds on to, and the main reason that occurs is because, thank you, E, thank you so much. The main reason that occurs is because we have this perception always that we have to fight something outside of us. That there's some force that is to blame, right? Essentially, it's our ego that creates sort of the concepts around other beings controlling us, and that is what they want us to think. Like, that's what they want. They are beings doing this. Like, so it's not like made up, but unity is, God is, allness is true. So that's what we are. It's part of us, all of it, right? If we're claiming we're infinite beings, then we can't say anything other than that. We have to arrive at that conclusion. And if that's the case, they must be symbolic, because I can't really grasp what they're doing as well. And so what we've done is, as society, which is what we always do with these figures, or these beings, these entities. So whether the Demiurge is an actual entity or not is still up for debate to me. I don't necessarily see it as that. I see it more like a frequency of consciousness that has capability of duality. That's more how I see that. The Demiurge is the physical reality. The more proper way that I like to frame it is that it's actually the womb of the Divine Mother, birthing our experience that we need to come back home. That's how I see it. So this concept of being in a prison, it could be, it's all based on perception, right? If we realize our infinite beingness, then we realize that we can't be controlled, really. Nothing can actually control us. That's an illusion of the material world, right? So of course, in the material world, people can make you do stuff, like you can get locked up or something, right? Like things can happen, right? And that's what the lie is. The material world is sort of basically is a lie in that way. It's backwards. It has to be backwards for the soul to properly experience as an identity. So prior to the Logos realizing that it wanted to make the mind complex, which is what made us a mind-body-spirit complex, prior to that, we were just mind-body spirits, which didn't experience a veiling, which meant that we would experience pain and then just cut it off. Like we had full control over the entire vessel. We knew exactly who we were, extensions of source. We still had we would sort of glide along the ground and just play and stuff. And we didn't really do anything other than play. Lemuria was basically like this, more or less. But that's when consciousness decided, the Logos decided to experiment with other frequencies, and we ended up then creating from those frequencies material worship, or investing in and out of the material, like putting our hearts and our soul investments into our house, or our other people in our lives that are reflections of things, not actual things that we can actually invest love in that way. So for example, when we send love at someone, they resonate and vibrate in their own harmony of love or fear, but love. and feel good. We haven't actually given them anything. What we've done is caused them to vibrate in sympathetic resonance with the love we're vibrating. They're only experiencing their energy. I've said this before a few years ago, but this illustrates it well. The idea that we're sending them energy is true to a degree, but it's not like we're infusing them with love. What we're doing is reflecting love at them, causing them to tremble in love. That's how healing works. We become crystals for a conduit of divinity to reflect purely at someone. And we do this actually just inadvertently. Sometimes in the grocery store, we'll smile at someone and we'll just radiate a love at them because we see the soul in them and stuff. These are some of the more effective things. That's why I always talk about how empaths need to stop worrying so much about their sensitivity and open up and open, because those are the people that are going to be able to smash that frequency out at others, which will help stimulate awakening in the consciousness, the global consciousness. So you could think of it like this: like attracts like, right? And the archonic or archonic forces, I'm not sure how we say that. I like archonic better, but I'm not sure if it's correct. And archon just means, I think it's ruler is what it means, ruler. And demiurge means like artisan or master crafter, actually. And in demi comes from the demios, I believe, which means for the people. Like basically, the way that I actually see this in truth is that we are the demiurge creating this, right? And that's how we would have to be somehow, right? It would have to be that way. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist. This place wouldn't exist. We are doing this. So what is our purpose in doing this? And our purpose is learning. When we feel trapped, we do feel trapped in the body and feel trapped in the reality that's dualistic and weird, because we haven't learned to properly orient our perception yet to the unity of all things, to the oneness and the stillness, which ends up being a self-evident faith and trust that everything's fine regardless of what's going on. When we're not able to see that in the moments, we're getting like kind of confused and stuff, and that's because we have lessons that are still coming up, right? That's all. It's not a problem. It's totally normal. Every day we should all be having probably lessons. If we're not having any lessons, then we won't have any more questions. So we'll probably leave, or we'll stay to offer thoughts. Offer thoughts to the collective, because a lot of us, you know, and I like to use monks as an example. They sit in the presence of oneness and literally raise planetary vibration just by sitting and doing that. So there are some of us that are like more oriented. Hi, Dan. Thanks for joining. They're more oriented to sitting in thinking and being sort of processors of information. And our intention then, someone like myself, our intention then is to use the mind to analyze whatever the divine or inspired, imaginative and symbolic connections that are coming in, that we can help give to people to help them make connections. That's why that attention deficit hyperactive mind is such a great tool for one like myself. Precisely why I have the mind I have is to be able to make these connections in multidimensional ways and then try to compartment it into speech. And then there are some of us that are more directly what we might perceive as loving, right? Like they go out of their way to be super loving to everyone. And I do this as well. But for me, like my experience as a man is like I spook people. If I'm too excited about them, I spook them. So I gotta be a bit more chill, it seems, right now in this society. I can't be the puppy dog that I feel like being, quite, because then people think I'm nuts. And it doesn't go over smoothly. So that little child in me has to settle it down for now, in the current environment I find myself in, and it's okay. But it is an act of restraint. However, some of us, especially if we're like bubbly kind of women, we can really do that, and people don't really think too much of it. But if I'm like that, my experience has been that it's not gone over super smoothly. Not that I care what they think, but I'm spooking them. I'm freaking them out. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm inspiring fear. Even though I'm trying to be loving, I'm inspiring fear. And this is actually how the archonic forces inspire activity to occur, is through distorting love into fear. And then, sort of like causing miscreation to occur. And so in the Gnostics, there you can see in just the theories of it all, the story of it all is all about, we're trying to fight against this creator being. Like it's a fight against it. So right there we can see that there's duality already in this concept itself. So it can't be true. It can't be the way that can't be true. That can only be ostensibly true in duality, right? So these beings do exist. Like I said, I don't know that the Demiurge is a being in that way. I see that as a frequency, a membrane of consciousness that's created. And I'm not sure that it's sentient in that way. I think it just responds to the vibration of the consciousness held within it, if that makes sense. So all the entities within it have the will to do what they're doing. And this is one of the main reasons that humans get this idea of a enemy, is so that they can blame someone for the way people behave. They got to blame something for that. But it's just ignorance. And the Gnostics have their own pure, amazing teaching, which is that their only enemy, the only real enemy, is ignorance. And it's interesting that they hold this belief that there's this force we're against, or that's against us, when really we must be that force. So they teach unity, they teach oneness, and they teach allness, infiniteness in the being, but then seem to think that there's this other force outside of the being. It doesn't make sense, right? And I mean no offense to these people that have thought these things. Part of my job here as a being is to depolarize and neutralize confused polarity in duality that humans make up. And I understand where it comes from, right? So and these writers as well, they did such a tremendous job on everything that they've brought. If you want to learn about these concepts, there's a lot of old Gnostic works and Gospels. I think Gospel of Thomas is a big one. I think that work is considered to be like blasphemous, so it wasn't included in the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken on that. But these thinkers and philosophers, really, and mystics, did amazing work. So I'm not trying to disparage anything by saying that some of it's just like it couldn't be that way. It just couldn't. Metaphysically, it doesn't make sense. Unless we're working in duality, which duality isn't real. So if it's not real, then it's not, it's not really a fight. The entire, actually, this universe is essentially playing through, in different ways, a dynamic of a hero, villain, bad guy, good guy game, really, that souls sign up to play. We're like, yeah, that sounds like a great game. And we get into it, and then we have in the human experience. We've gotten so sucked into the game, thinking the game is the identity, like that the identity itself is real and that we're actually the character in the game. We get so wrapped up in every little thing, which is where the archonic forces feed the most. Actually, it's actually in the little micro things, the micro irritations, like when our devices don't work properly and we're like, we freak out or something. That's where some of the most archonic or parasitic feeding happens, because when I remember earlier I was saying like attracts like. They love that, and people call it what's the word? Louche. They call it louche, and I don't know where that name comes from. If somebody knows, that'd be great. But the feeding of that on that is the same feeding that happens in the physical and what they call the adrenochrome. It's the same thing in the material world. It's a result of fear, right? So these entities feed on that vibration because that's the vibration that they live in and harmonize with. Now, they can't actually ascend to, sixth density, essentially, into proper unity seeing. They can't get there from that path. They all eventually become of the light and emerge into unification with sixth density, where they actually swap their polarity and become positively oriented. They all do that. That's why we tend to refer to them in my order as brothers and sisters. They're brothers and sisters. They've led themselves astray on a different path. Not even astray, really. That no separation. There is no. They live in an illusion of what is not, in a fear, negativity state of nothingness, darkness, and that's their soul's choice, and we just honor it for what it is and see that it's not sane, but it's consciousness itself learning of itself, right? And so that's why we call them galactic friends. They're our galactic friends. They teach us things, right? Now, we tend to try to presume, like even the Demiurge, that it's an anthropomorphic type, human-like thing. It has human-type thoughts. But I hope people can see how ignorant that is, to presume that the being that far advanced, that's manifesting the entirety of the universe, the physical universe, thinks in some similar way that a human mind can grasp. No, that's not it's not possible. At that, as the density of consciousness rises into fifth, we become very, very wise. We can be negatively oriented wise, or we can be positively oriented wise, right? And loving. We learn what love is in fourth density. In fifth density, we learn what wisdom is, and we balance love and wisdom together. We're potentially only interested in self-service. We're loving self above everything else. Above. We realize the material world's an illusion when we love ourselves above everything else, no matter what. And we're not really interested in giving. We're just interested in receiving benefits for ourselves. Or we go more the service to others, where we're like, we love ourselves enough that we have enough fuel to just give it out to everyone as best we can, as much as society allows. Right? It's one of the challenging things I'll say as a man too is it's like I find women are more receptive, so I'm more open to openly engage with women, and they think I'm trying to hit on them. But that's often so far from my mind. I just want to like compliment them on things and talk to them about things, and it of course is weird for them, right? And I don't actually do it because of this, because I can tell that they're confused about like what I'm doing. So Dan just said something beautiful. I still can't wrap my head around how negative folk can get through the veil and into complete oneness. Yeah, so I can help elucidate on that a little bit. The three energy centers here can open without the heart being open, and the I is what is the gateway to intelligent infinity. So they realize that they're all that is, but they don't realize that everything else is too. That's really the only difference. They know they are all that is, so they know they are the one, but other people aren't. That's really the only difference. Metaphysically speaking, the heart is closed and they've skipped it. They've jumped over the heart and connected essentially the identity in the lower three chakras now runs the show. And the soul is just going, I guess I'm resting. I guess we're resting. I'm still not sure exactly, but there is souls that want to experience that too, right? But if the heart isn't open, the way I feel it, for me anyways, if the heart isn't open, the soul, like, it's probably younger or something. Like, it's not, maybe it's communicating more through solar plexus or something. I don't fully grasp it, but essentially that's the only real difference, is that they recognize they are all that is. They just don't see that in others at all. Others are just illusions, basically, to play with, is sort of the mindset. And they, just as I was saying, they see it as a game. So they'll have masters, and the master will enslave them. That's how it works in that trajectory. The master enslaves. It's much like in Star Wars with the Sith Lords and stuff. The master enslaves the disciple and says and dictates, and because the master only teaches what's absolutely necessary for the disciple to do what the master wants them to do. Like, the disciple doesn't necessarily even realize that they're enslaved this way. They're just dedicated to the wisdom and power they see in the master. They know that the master will give that to them just by being around them. They'll absorb it. They'll learn of them, right? So the power, the like almost sensual desire for the power is what drives them forward. Whereas in a positive being, the heart and soul drives us forward, instead of the animalistic urges, the sensual desire for getting and power. It's a sensual thing. It's like, it's where our sexual drive sort of comes from a little bit too. And most of our desires in our human body is sexual, really, in nature. Sensual, sexual. Like, it's the same thing. Like, think about when we eat something really delicious, it's sort of like an orgasm, right? Sort of. It's not quite. I don't know why I said it that way, or orgasm. But, that's because it replicates in the physical body what we experience with God orgasms, Godgasms, divine Kundalini shivers. It's like the same kind of thing. And we're replicating it through an illusion as best we can figure how to do. Because that's what our soul craves, is home, which is that feeling of ecstasy that we recall. So we try to find that. And that's where all addiction comes from. Like, heroin or something brings us to that state of ecstasy, or MDMA, even ecstasy. It's all the same sort of thing. It's like trying to adjust the consciousness to be the state that feels more homey and coping with the reality. right? But we are all addicted to the reality, basically. Until we're not, but we are until we start to realize that we're addicted to the reality. We should all essentially take a 12-step program. And I know there's some controversy about those programs. I just mean that we're all basically addicted to each other and the world and drama and all these things, right? Whether we have substance addictions or not, we express into this world in an addictive way, usually. And these are the areas that the archonic forces use to manipulate beings. So you can imagine that one that is more animalistic, more not opening the heart, but still connecting into intelligent infinity, becomes what could be seen as a puppet for an archonic or demonic type force, or like the Orion group, our galactic friends, to move them about, right? As a pawn in their game. That's how that works. Whereas the positive beings ask their galactic light friends for guidance to help in this game of struggle and power versus force, light versus dark. This make-believe fantasy of a struggle that third, fourth, and fifth density beings participate in. And so those of us who have souls that come from higher density, like 6, which is where most wanderers and starseeds are from, 6th or higher. Actually, probably not higher. Although, I don't know. I think a 6th density might be able to experience what I experienced, which was a 7th density soul walk-in. But anyways, it's not super important. But the beings that are just sort of obviously aware that unity's, yeah, obviously we're all one. And probably when we're hearing freaky things, we're sort of like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I can tell that it doesn't make sense. Truth Rector says, hey, I think I know you. Are you the giant dragon I seen? What was your name? If I am thinking correct, I was the first to donate $5 to your YouTube account. Thank you so much for that. Did you donate that in a super chat? I remember getting that in a premiere, I think, of I don't remember which one it was, but thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. And you know, I love dragons. Dragons are my thing, really. I wear a dragon ring all the time. In one of the other videos, I talk about actually the Kundalini and how that for me is a dragon, and it's sort of like my baby in a way. So it's funny. Mark says, hey Sean, just started listening to your videos. Thanks for hosting these discussions. You're doing good work. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. E says, interesting. I just rewatched a tarot reading that discussed divine matrix, 2 words that don't seem to go together, which was also said in the YouTube video. Yeah, exactly. Like, we can create a happy dream here, but it's still a dream. So the idea of like a divine matrix, it's like oxymoron, right? Like, is that the word? It's not. It couldn't really be that way. We do live in hell, more or less, but we bring heaven to earth. Hell, we go into hell and bring heaven down to it with us. That's the whole story of the hero's journey, really. Like, we go down into the challenge, and then we embrace it, and we're like, yeah, this is nuts, but I'm good. That's sort of the whole trajectory that this Logos has designed, and we play by. And humans have come up with really, really interesting, like, sort of terms. Yeah, yeah. You know, it was we just come up with all of these concepts and enemies, really, and we don't necessarily realize that we by believing in the enemies is what allows the enemies access to us that way. Like believing in an enemy has causes an enemy to be there, right? When you see them all as friends, it becomes more just comical. Um, and maybe I'll talk about my experience with archonic energy. So I've seen it in myself a couple of times where something seems to take over and make me do something ridiculous. And it doesn't seem like it's just my unconsciousness. It actually seems like I've been tricked or you know, almost taken over. This was years and years ago. And I noticed that I just wanted to understand that more, what that was, because it felt distinctly different than just being like angry or upset and like acting out. It was more like I said something or was really like weird that was uncharacteristic of me, but it was drawing on an old wound, drawing on an old different wounds. And I wanted to understand where that was coming from. Later, I became more at peace with myself, and I didn't really experience any of that stuff anymore. But I started to notice that on occasion, I would witness an archonic force sort of change what another person's doing. Like I'd feel it. I couldn't see it. My clairvoyance isn't great. I see auras and stuff, but not to the degree that many can see, and I'm sort of jealous of them. A little bit. But so I don't see it with my eyeballs, but I feel this that oh there's something here doing. Oh, this is like shifted. They've shifted. This is oh, I know what this is, right? This is something else is happening here with this being. And then what happens is they seem to go into this mode where they start to try to inflict the suffering that they experienced onto you, or onto someone around you or something. Like they try to do that somehow because they get tricked into thinking the same thing's happening, and at this time they're meant to do this, like send it back, and they're just sort of behaving autonomously. You know, and it's weird at first. So it's happened to me multiple times now, multiple times, and I realized that you know, it has nothing to do with them, the being, like the human, it's at all. A lot of the ways that people act out towards us, especially, you know, it's a lot of it is actually this type of thing being manipulated by this archonic force. And the people themselves may not even remember it. This is where I believe that the episodic memory things occur from narcissistic behavior, where, you know, and if you're into psychology, you might know what I'm talking about, but it's common for a narcissistic individual to just not remember the truth of what they did, like what they said, or, you know, whatever. It's like they've wiped the memory. And I think that this is part of this, that basically the distortions allow the being to be manipulated as sort of a puppet in different ways to try and dim the light in others, because the light's already dimmed a bit in that one. Not truly dimmed, but they're asleep, right? They don't realize what they are, and they're asleep, and they're in that state. They have more distortion. They're not really healing themselves yet. It's not their fault though either. That's really important. It isn't their fault for them being confused about things. Like, remember when we were confused. Always remember how confused we still are. right? We still have no idea what's going on. We never will, honestly, until we do, and then we're done evolving, which means we're done. We do it again. So, you know, when we realize that there is a frequency here that's synthetic in nature, or it's programmatic, it's artificial somehow. Like I don't understand it exactly, but it's not a real frequency, and this is what takes over those individuals that gets them to then act out. And this happens with like all of the most atrocious things you can think of. But it's not the entity making the being do that. It's the entity just powering up a fear and trauma thing, which then the entity will go do with its will what it wills to be done based on its own trauma. So the being that's manipulating, the archonic force, or the entity that's manipulating, archonic or otherwise, like Orion group or something, they gain polarity when they're successful in their manipulation. And so it's this game really of chess players. And so of the light, we don't have like a master that we supplicate to other than the one, the infinite all, right? But they have particular agreements and arrangements. And so those of us who are resonant with service to others and positivity are just kind of, we vastly outnumber the other beings by approximately 90% of the universe is positively oriented. So it's only 10% that's negatively oriented, and they all will eventually jump ship when everything completes in this cycle of, or octave of the creation, right? When everything completes, all of that becomes one again, right? So there is no real like distinction between any of that really. However, in our experience, we have to be wise and navigate our reality as such, and notice that there is a force, synthetic or otherwise, whatever it is. It's causing people to it exploits their distortions, their wounds. Happy I love you day. That's my my alarm. 1:43 p.m. Blessings to Mr. Rogers, that kind soul, a beautiful, beautiful human. So I'm going to get into the chat a little bit more now and see if we have any other things to talk about. Dan says, I was taking MD twice a week for about 12 months, ended up going completely psychotic of 5 days, then the eye opening a couple of months later. Yeah. Usually when we when we open the eye as well, we tend to have psychotic type states because our nervous system isn't quite ready for the reality that we're experiencing. That's why I don't actually teach any of that stuff ever to anyone. Because it I've seen the through my own irresponsibility, I've seen the effects that I have had on myself by trying to push these chakras open, you know, and also the ego points us to the eye first, right? But if we have this open and all this down here is messed up, telling you, that's a bad time. That's a bad time for a positively oriented being to be in that state, because they're going to feel just completely confused, completely conflicted with themselves, not knowing which way is up, honestly, and getting sort of lost in the clouds probably as well, into delusions and things. But they're delusions that are made of truth, so they feel quite real, and that they are real in that way. Like, a lot of these experiences and psychotic states are actually divine awakenings that spur the reality about us to react in different ways too. Like people taking us to a mental health facility, or whatever it is. So we have those experiences as well. It gets part of it is because we haven't, at least in my experience, I'll just say that when I have these really big explosive states into essentially psychosis, we lose our mind, right? We lose the tether to the body. In my experience, when the eye is going through these big openings, we don't really understand the social dynamics in those situations, at least in my experience. They're like foreign to me. I don't know what, I just see lovely souls everywhere. And, I don't seem to filter myself or act appropriately, honestly. Like in society's view, I'm being weird. Like one of the things, for example, is like I was walking around my neighborhood and I was just doing like a little chant, like a like that. And that spooked people. Like people were spooked out. And I didn't think anything of it. I don't even know what I was doing. I just felt like doing that, and I just was doing that, and it felt great. I was connecting with God, right? And I was doing blessing the neighborhood, right? And I think at the time I was bringing in all this energy, and the world around me was like, whoa, and like people were coming out, I guess, to see, and I didn't even notice them. But later I heard that I freaked people out. So that's just an example. It's just they're not used to seeing something like that, and it felt completely natural to me. At the time, there was no even concern or thought that anything would be weird about it. I was not worried about any of that. And so as we're learning to be in the world but not of it, we also have to learn that balance of like, although obviously nothing's wrong with that behavior, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just the way I look, I guess. I'm this bearded man, and I'm walking around, like people get this idea that I'm nuts, right? I must be nuts. And I mean, yeah, to be fair, sure. Yeah, I'm nuts. Sure. But I was just, to me, I was just being loving. I was doing my wizarding, right? I was being my druid self. I was being my authentic, true self, which was blessing the neighborhood with a protective chant and a loving gesture to honor the place that I've been living. That's all I was doing in my heart, right? And so for everyone to react the way they did, it's I've talked before, but we're actually more afraid of our light than we are of the darkness. In fact, the reason we think we have an enemy is because we're too afraid to look at our own light. The reason that the Demiurge is a thing that we oppose is because we'd rather oppose that thing than look at what we are in truth. You know? I love you too, Dan. I'm glad I make you laugh. I like to try and giggle about these. I don't want it to be too, I want to affirm for people that everything's okay, and isn't it funny how things are? Isn't it kind of absurd? I don't want to be one who propagates this, oh, we all have to heal, we're all so wounded and broken. Like, yeah, like stuff happened, it's cool, right? Like stuff happened, let's just notice it and like let go of it. Just see what it is and let it go, right? I think trying to keep it light that way, I think the world's more ready for that now. Like, people are tired of being broken because they know it's not true now. There's too much frequency here now for people to ignore themselves. And you see it everywhere. A big, really, I want to plug this guy because he's great. Kyle Cease. He's like a comedian and he did a bunch of Hollywood stuff. And then he like woke up and found God and found his, not in a religious way, but in a like, oh my gosh, I'm the one. Oh, I'm the awareness. Oh, that type of, he had an awakening. And now he teaches, you know, and he talks and he's all about presence. And I can tell that he's getting very Eckhart on us. And he's a great example of just, not only are we going to see just random people doing this, but we're also going to see celebrities doing it. And we've seen Jim Carrey, Russell Brandt's a huge one. And what's his face? Kyle that I just mentioned, Kyle Cease. You know, it's clear that people are just realizing what they are, right? That's obviously clear. To a degree that's like, we have never seen proportions like this in awakening. You know, we actually basically skipped our last harvest, which is why all of the volunteers are here. Because when the harvest doesn't happen, the gardeners get concerned, is what Ra said, right? When the harvest doesn't occur, the gardeners go, huh, do we water them? Like, what do we even poke at them? These are beings that don't at all understand why we're the way we are, really. Our way of being to them is quite incomprehensible, just as their way of being is to us completely incomprehensible. Truth says the earth is dropping all density, so must we remove unnecessary burdens in order to evolve? Yeah, exactly. The burdens aren't like necessary. They were part of our story before, you know? Our story, and we thought we were the story. So it was important for us to hold the burden. But we aren't the story. The burden is over now. Like it happened already and it's over now. Like, how are we now? We're good other than the burden, right? So like, maybe we don't have to have the burden. Maybe we can just say, it is over. And then when we re-experience it, because we will, we almost indefinitely will, when we let go of a type of burden, experience something that really reminds us of it deeply. It won't be the same thing usually. Sarah says, this is why they say Christ is the only way. The only way out is in. There is no seeking externally that leads to the infinite. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Thank you, Sarah, for saying that. That's why I say as well, Christ is the way. That's why he said, I am the truth, I am the way. You know, not religion though, right? It doesn't have anything to do with religion. Religion is, you know, archonically inspired, we could say. It's inspired by control paradigms. But it's interesting that in religion, you can see that even love, or the wanting to be virtuous and righteous of the identity, is exploited. Right? We see that in religion, where for God, atrocities committed. In the name of God, we do this and that, and we hurt everyone, right? That's one of the more subtle exploitations, because the being that's being exploited that way doesn't, like, they believe they're in that what they're doing is the righteous thing. They don't even realize. They may even really feel like they're doing what is the best for all, like they're trying to serve everyone. And then they're just confused, really. But they believe that. So we can start to notice that even that like deep confusion, that still Christ is the way. Christ demonstrated the way. And that's the other reason that I have issues with some of the Gnostic teachings, which try to link Yaldabaoth, I believe, wasn't it? Yaldabaoth? The Demiurge, or the main Archon, with Jesus, that Jesus was somehow like enslaved to that being or acting on behalf of that being. This is something that goes around a bit. I've tried to take my time to objectively analyze that and feel into that. So analyze it from thought and what I've read and seen, but also feel into that. And I just think back to the teachings. The teachings are oppositional to the authority of religion itself. In the actual Bible, Jesus is essentially saying to the Pharisees that you are of the Demiurge, right? He's basically pointing it out. Like, you are of control and power and fear. So if he was an agent of that archonic force, he wouldn't be doing that, right? He wouldn't be doing that. Sarah says, yes, Christ as in the Christ light within, embodying the consciousness. Yeah, exactly. Embodying the Christ light. Jesus showed us how one would do that. Jesus shows us as an example how one might do that in that situation. We're not all in that situation, though we all do go through our own daily crucifixion, our own daily struggle of some kind. There isn't really variance in the difficulty of struggle. You'll notice that something very small can happen and you feel like it's the worst friggin' thing in the world. That's very common, right? And then people will call you bipolar. No, you're just sensitive. You're just sensitive. You're seeing reality. You're seeing that this isn't right. I'm supposed to be in a heavenly state and this is not fucking right. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just upset about something that is false, right? So none of these disorders are truly disorders even. They're just society labeling someone who doesn't follow their standards. I'm not a physician, so I'm just a man speaking. I guess you could call me a man, but if you have to. So Dan says, you can skip the heart centers, so not by Christ. And you check out this paradox with, so essentially, you're not going Christ's way unless if you skip the heart, you're not going the way of Christ. So you can't, the Christ light doesn't activate in you. You're not in that frequency of consciousness. You're in its opposite. So Christ consciousness is the same. What people call 5D, that's Christ consciousness, but most people don't tie those two together, usually because of trauma from religion. But it's the same thing. And 5D does not necessarily mean that you're serving other people. You could be serving yourself. So when you see people that are doing spiritual teachings and stuff, but they're talking about how they are a god and I am the god like Anubis and I'm whatever and they're getting very excited about themselves, that's the other side of 5D. Both sides are valid, and actually we're sort of meant to experience a bit of both. Like, we taste test before making our decisions about like what path we're on. And because beings here are all just waking up, they have to wake up and then they have to pick. Am I going to serve others in the name of the Creator, or am I going to serve myself in the name of myself to serve the Creator? Because the Creator is me. So you can't serve anything but the Creator. So there can't be anything wrong with whatever anyone's doing, because they're doing it to serve the Creator. There's no action that isn't in service. That's why right and wrong isn't a real thing. There's just free will. But we notice that some behaviors are not appropriate, because as a planet, as a society, as a mind, or as a social memory complex, we've decided positive polarity is what's going to go here. We've decided this already. So now that's why we're seeing everything die that isn't true. And in the dying, it screams like the Wicked Witch. I'm melting! Ah! That's why that happens. The ego screams as it dies to try to get you to like listen to it. So we see that individually, we also see it collectively. And so we're going to see the ego scream and scream collectively as well. Truth Rector says it's hard to be normal in society because not many is living true to themselves, but in a dream. So when you do something out of the ordinary, it scares them. Yeah, exactly. Some do awaken. Yeah, exactly. Some people are like, oh, wow, interesting. That's thank you for saying that, actually, because when I was being all nuts, like they thought I was being nuts. There were people probably that observed me that were like, oh, isn't that swell? And then they saw their companions that were not pleased, perhaps, right? But it gives them an opportunity to just, there's two flavors. Some will experience that positively and some will experience it negatively. Sarah T says, my heart opening coincided with the anointment, that ceremony. It was, yes, anointment. Yeah. We'll have a manifest experience of an anointment where we realize that we're a son of God. Or whatever terms we want to use. But yeah, we'll have that for sure. And in my experience, that's when, so I perceive 3 boundaries in the heart. It opens the first boundary and we like sort of our awareness pops and then we have like 3 boundaries. And when the 3 boundaries of the heart open fully in the final one, that's when we are anointed to the kingdom. We're now in what's called the 7th initiation, where we are manifesting heaven on earth. That's what that process, as far as I understand in my own metaphysical studies and my own path, is that's where we're inhabiting. We're in the 7th initiation. So we're still learning how to be God amongst gods, how to be king of our reality. King, queen, like merged, right? Balanced, gracious, compassionate, merciful, benevolent. And that happens. We'll have an experience of just feeling anointed. Yeah, it'll show up for sure somehow. And on the negative path, they have the same thing, but it's just as profound for them too. Just as profound, just as deep. Like it's important to recognize that. They have their master come and say, "Oh, you've been such a good boy, such a good girl, right? I'm going to give you this blessing. You are now the master of this reality," right? Sort of thing. So they have that experience also. But in order for them to get to that degree, they have to be 95% in service to self. Someone like Genghis Khan is a good example, or Rasputin. These are 2 entities that did this successfully. So, we talk about Christ consciousness, But just as we have like the pedestal of Jesus being Christ here, they have the pedestal of Rasputin and Genghis Khan. Like that's how negative they would have to be. How oriented to serving only the self, for them to actually graduate into fourth density negativity, where they are placed under the heel of their master. And if they are powerful enough and enough learned, they actually can reverse the bidding process and make the master become their enslaved being. This is super rare, but it can happen. I think there's information about that in the Law of One. So Sarah T says, you've mentioned your walk-in experience a few times. I had an interesting experience during an intense part of awakening and felt I understood that while I changed a lot, it wasn't that I took on a different consciousness, but that I retrieved an aspect of my own soul and I felt more whole. I mean, I still get like me, but that I had taken on a huge portion of new consciousness. Yes. And felt that someone considered that a walk-in. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So in my specific experience, just to give you, because you're right, you're absolutely right. In my specific experience, I had already agreed to have a walk-in soul. It is a different soul that's braided now into the Sean soul that was there. Sean obviously isn't the name of the soul. Souls don't have names that way. But in my experience, I had it's obvious to me that there's a part that is like foreign to Sean, but is suddenly now part of me. It's foreign though, but home at the same time. Not like when we have a consciousness expansion where we realize we're more of a being. That usually is, we tend to start to perhaps want to resonate more with what our soul wants to be named, or perhaps our spirit. There's this frequency of new awareness, and it can be mistaken for a walk-in. It's really easy and common for it to be mistaken for a walk-in experience. When it's like you say, it's just recovery, it's just healing, right? It's just balancing. So you bring up a really good point that actually I would say most experiences are not walk-in experiences. But they can feel that way. There's actually not that much of a difference to the feeling, other than the walk-in. They're just not going to question it. They'll know for sure because they'll know, you know. The other side of it, when they're questioning it, they're not sure, then who knows? They'll figure it out, right? We'll figure it out. And when I first thought I was a walk-in, I also went through a period of just not believing that it was possible for walk-ins to be a thing. But then I was shown. I was over years shown how it happens, like what happens, and how it works. And you know, I haven't really gone into depth with that, but there's a particular sort of process that happens with bidding the council to walk into a human experienced soul. And there's it's all part of the illusion of this creation that enables this to occur. But it's like you say, when we have awakenings, it it feels new but the same. It's like new but the same. It feels like us still, but it's like more or something. That's not usually how the walk-in experience feels like. The walk-in experience feels like I have another being now in me, with me, like, but it's part of me, foreign but not. It's Geminis will probably understand this better because they're used to feeling two sort of opposing energies in themselves. But in the walk-in experience, it's not opposing. The walk-in will actually guide the other soul. And I don't fully understand how it all works, honestly. But it also doesn't really matter, really. You know, whether what I'm saying is true or not is sort of like, it's sort of like we're still the same thing. We're still a child of God experiencing reality, learning and evolving into enlightenment and transcending hell. So whether we term it walk-in or not isn't of any, like, it's not critical to our understanding of what we are. And I would say that, like, some souls will just fall into the walk-in thing and they're wrong. But it doesn't matter. They'll realize eventually, oh, I get it. I thought I was, but I'm not. And it's not that when you have a walk-in, it's not that you are the walk-in either, necessarily. Like in my experience, like I said, it was braided together, like two chords together, harmony. And it's not that they've taken over, they've just contributed, like, a lot. Whereas we tend to have channels that contribute here and there, but in this case, it's investment into the frame with me as Sean, or Sean's original soul, or whatever. So now it's almost as if there's two souls guiding the vessel, and Sean's soul's often confused. So, Sarah says, to me, that is the true twin flame. Oh, I feel that way too. I'm never alone. I feel them always. Interesting. Certainly that could explain the entire braiding. That could explain the Kundalini serpent, the dual, the caduceus. That could explain everything. However, I'll just say that Sean is the one that experiences the twin flame activation in him. The walk-in soul is aiding that. The walk-in soul doesn't operate the vehicle for me, in my experience. But it's like another passenger in the vehicle. It is... So Sean has the dual flame, twin flame in him burning. And this other soul is guiding him through that. It's different from a spirit guide. It's different. It's integrated. I can feel this presence all the time, and it's not the feminine aspect of me or the masculine aspect or the twin flame dynamic that we have inside to unify. I know what you're referring to, and I agree entirely that's the thing. Like that's what we're doing, if we're honest. And we try to do that with others, but that's not sane. It'd be nice if it was. It'd be comfortable, right? But yeah, it's not. That's not it. The external doesn't do it. I know how it sounds. For me, it's more like a tri-flame. Let's say that then. It's more like a tri-flame in my experience. There are, yeah, that is the best way for me to explain it. There are three energies, not the Trinity. But there are three energies that are really helping Sean navigate. One is Ka. Now we could call it, actually, we could just call it the Trinity. And maybe it is. Maybe that's all it is, and I call it a walk-in. That's possible. I don't know. I don't know what to call it. Like, I don't want to pretend that I have any fucking clue what happened specifically. All I know is this entity called Ka became part of me in a moment and began just saying, you're going to now teach all this stuff. And if you go back in my videos, like, I used to play video games online. Like, I was never into anything of this. And suddenly I am, and I am able to bring through, I think, important things. Or at least truthful things. Whether they're important or not is a matter of discretion, but so, like you say, the term walk-in and the term twin flame, like, they imply separation. They're not quite right, you know? It's not right. But I don't know of another way to describe it. And when I identified myself that way, it was intentional to say that I am a spirit here embodying a frame. I walked into this vessel and took over, is how it feels. Not took over in a weird way, took over like control, or not even control, just took over the guidance system, you could say. Instead of being guided by the soul, the infant soul, or the less experienced soul, I'm now guided by the Master Ka, or perhaps just the Holy Spirit. I dressed like a wizard elf thing. That's what he looks like. Yeah, Triflame. Yeah, I mean, it's who knows, right? Like, I'm on this constant, and we all are on this constant journey of self-discovery. And we're trying to put words and names to things that we don't really comprehend. Let's just be honest about it, right? All of the masters of all of the ages, that's all they were ever doing, is trying to create word salads for people that help them understand themselves. So, like, whether it's a walk-in soul, it's not really important. And we'll figure out what the truth of it is for ourselves anyway, you know? Oh, Sarah says, I see, it's funny you say braided into the soul. I see 2 strands, 12 strand, yeah, DNA. I saw this soul entering their body with mine in a rapturous passion during meditation. It was beautiful. I'm a typo queen today. I really believe that's the true twin flame. Sean, that's a twin. Sarah says, yeah, I can't date anymore. I have felt, I just want to say, you said that's a twin flame. I'll say it's the way the language works. Like, what I describe sounds to you like a twin flame, but what I'm trying to describe is not that, right? So it's a perfect example of just how, like, we can't truly get across what we're intending, and, you know, like, I get it. I get it. Like, these concepts, like, even as I'm speaking it, I'm aware that it sounds like that. Yeah, I'm aware. Sarah says, yeah, I can't date anymore. I've felt that merge. I can't do anything less. I can see how I've been trying to merge with every soulmate I've met, but it wasn't possible. Yes. Yeah, you can't do anything less. Anything less than harmony is why? Why? What for? Like, for what? For who? So if I'm feeling out of harmony with another, okay, what's that about? Like, is it, am I just judging? But no, I'm not judging. They're like, they're offering vibes that are like not meh. And we basically get to a place where I at least in my experience, people don't hold enough open-hearted acceptance for me to like really feel like it's safe to invest in them in a romantic way. I wouldn't know how to. I haven't met anyone now, like, that I can understand, that I can navigate that with at this point in my life, because it seems that other people would rather have problems than love. And I'm not into that. I would rather affirm solutions and notice optimistic plans for progression and expansion. And my standards, I guess, are too high. That's, I think, the issue. My standards for that are too high. I can only listen to it for so long, like where people are just complaining and complaining and complaining, and sort of wrapped in different woundings. And you know, I'm the type of person that will sit with them and try to help them let go of some of it, and try to help them vent it, and all that stuff. But then they don't, right? So and then these woundings start to govern all their behavior, and I can see right through it. So I'm like, I don't know what to do about it. And yeah, it's not wise to seek their company, really. If that's what we're seeing, you know. Sarah says, maybe what I believe is a twin flame is different from the connotation that you have for the term. I don't think I think of them in the same fashion as most people. Yeah, that's what I mean, is we have our own, like, we have our own thoughts about what the term even means. So when I think of twin flame, I just think of Sean's soul uniting with itself. That's sort of what I think of. So when I'm talking walk-in, I'm saying this was a different thing than that. That happened too. This was a different thing for me in my experience. But it doesn't really matter what we call it. We could just call it, we could call it anything. And I also don't understand my own experience yet. I don't fully get it. You know, I'm still confused, and there's still veiling. I don't get it totally. But so Sarah says, E says, I think words are like archetypes, very limited constructs of what we have. Exactly. Yeah, they're symbols. Symbols, exactly. You know, every word that we say is a symbol of an intention, a symbol that we're, but my intention and the symbol I give as a word doesn't necessarily mean what someone else sees. This is why we used to write in hieroglyphs, or what's the other word? Kineas. Anyway, I don't know what the word is. Cuneiform. In Sumerian, cuneiform. We would write that way because it was intuitive in nature. We weren't trying to convey our own particular meaning. We were trying to convey a deeper, more intuitive meaning of things. So the observer doesn't receive a word, they receive a whole concept of symbol. Not, you know, and that was the more pure way of communicating. And the more we fell into the mind, the more we developed more and more distorted language and writing. So now we still have the same, there's there's still correspondences in our language now, in English, that correspond to like mystic keys and things. And that's a really interesting wormhole to get into. How our language controls us. Because it does. You know, people talk about spelling, right? Yeah, cuneiform, emojis. Dan says emojis. Exactly, that's our cuneiform now, right? Emojis now are like, hey, I love this. I hate this. I'm laughing at this. Right? Like, we're trying to convey an emotion, an intention, a deeper thing through the symbol. That's yeah, exactly. Yeah, Sarah, maybe you should take a look at the Sumerian cuneiform. They have a lot of really, really cool ones that, for me, like it's like I remember them, but I don't. I'm sure you guys have had that experience before, where you're like, I remember this, but like I don't. Also, I still don't remember it. So I think it's probably about time. Oh, there's more stuff. Truth Rector says, I got an idea. If you're interested, my closest family say I have a knack for wise messages. If you're interested, I can put together some of them and send them to you for thought. Sure. If you like some of it, you could put it all in your own teachings. Yeah, like I won't teach what I'm told. What I'll do is distill it, for sure. Feel free to send me an email with that stuff. SeanTheHero1111@gmail.com. That's my adorable email that I made when I thought I was here to like save the planet. So I like to keep it. And I like to explain it every time because it's embarrassing a little bit. But that's the email. Yeah, feel free to send. I don't teach other people's teachings, really. But of course, if you have like really wise sayings and like I can attribute them to you and talk about them, that would be quite a treat to receive new wise sayings that we can talk about. I would love that. Sarah says, people are addicted to drama and don't know what love really is. Yes. I've been told my standards were too high my whole life, but I just remembered real love, and I want that, nothing less. Exactly. That's what I mean when I say my standards are too high. All I really mean is that the beings that are capable of like really open-hearted love, there's not that many of them right now. So my standards are too high for the environment that I'm in. The environment that isn't like worried about obligating me to commit to them in some weird way, just this open-hearted love of the other, regardless of what they're doing. Like I actually expect my partner to never question me, ever. Like, not in a weird way of like I decide what's happening, but in a way of like, if I'm doing a thing, do not get in my way. Like, I'm doing my thing. Like, I'm guided to do this thing. So get out of my face, right? With any type of back talk. Like, and that sounds so patriarchal. It sounds like, but I would never involve myself in what they're doing. Never would I even get involved. Go do exactly what you feel in your heart. And that's it. And let's do that together, right? In harmony together, we do that. Anything less than that to me is just drama, and like I'm not interested, really, right? So it might sound like I'm saying that I'm not open to feedback. I'm not open to manipulation. I'm not open to someone trying to convince me of their opinion about something. You know, that energy of being convinced shows for me there's a desperation in the other person. They're trying to convince me of something, right? And so when that type of energy is being offered, I'm like, I don't know how to, I don't know how to hang with this, really. Not on a romantic or relationship level like that. I don't know how to hang out with that. If I'm stupid and then someone's like, hey, you're being dumb, that's great. But I'm not being dumb anymore. So maybe I'm just being judged. Maybe how I am is fine. And if they don't like it, they can kick rocks somewhere, right? That's like my stance now. And that empowerment and centeredness in self is like off-putting for people a little bit and a little freaky for people. Especially romantic partners that kind of like they're used to wanting to have that control sort of thing. The power dynamic of like who holds the power in the relationship. No, we both hold the power. Both of us are sovereign and are free to do whatever we want. And then we make agreements or commitments that align with our hearts. And that's it. It's very simple. But the way I like to look at that, just because we're talking about this, is the one my capacity to actually accept that reality is what allows it to be here. So when I can notice that all humans are capable of loving, then they will become that, right? Everything will shift into that as I keep holding that intention. So instead of looking at things as like, bad, good, and this person's mean, that person's nice, and whatever. Everyone's mean sometimes and nice other times, and we have no idea what anyone's doing. All we can focus on is ourselves. So that's where all the treasures are. So Jane says, wow, was wondering the same thing about my standards in relationship. Thank you, guys. Yeah. I think standards are fine. Like, I don't resonate with people that want to argue with me. Like, I'm not here to fight with you about anything. Like, if I say I'm going to go over into that park and like play guitar, and you're like, oh, well, the people might not like it, and get behind me, Satan. What are you talking about? Get out of my face. Nonsense. It's offensive, in fact. I want to go be loving and whatever to these people, and you're like trying to dissuade me from creative expression. That's what we call the adversary. That's a forked tongue coming out. That's the serpent going, oh, don't do that. That's Satan speaking through them. And Jesus says it to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Get thee behind me, Satan. And that's all he's saying. It's not about Peter. It's just Peter has let himself become the pumpkin eater. What? I don't know what I'm talking about, but Peter has let himself split his tongue and speak a insipid message. Your friend has told you that what you are about to do that's loving and awesome is not awesome. And your friend is speaking as the adversary, Satan, or the archonic force, the Demiurge force. So just to tie it back, right, to the topic at hand. So we don't listen to them, but we can't really be in a relationship with somebody that's doing that. Like, we just How? I wouldn't know how to. We don't know how to. We can accept everything. Passive, peace, love, acceptance, surrender. But I can't accept you putting me under your heel. That I can't accept. I'm an infinite being of power. So your thoughts and opinions about things are not relevant to me. Your feelings are. Your heart. Who you are as a soul. That's where I'm at. But your mind's opinions about the reality are not real, really. They're interesting, perhaps, but not real. So, becomes challenging. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I think it's time I go make some lunch or something. I haven't eaten today. I don't think. Yeah. Sometimes I don't eat because I forget, just forget that eating's a thing sometimes. But I'm learning. I'm figuring it out. Like the body has to eat stuff sometimes, I guess, right? I think you guys are all amazing. Sorry for some of the comments I missed. There's so much chat. You guys are amazing. All of your thoughts, all of your contributions, always a blessing. I gave you the email, seanthehero1111@gmail.com. It's also in the About page. And you can also look me up on Instagram under Words of a Wizard. Words of a Wizard. You can find me there if email is not appropriate for you. But I would love for you to send me whatever you want. I get sent lots of cool stuff. You guys send me lots of cool stuff. And thank you very much to those who've decided to donate. Literally, you feed me. Like, I wouldn't be able to be in this apartment without you, the people who support me. And very grateful for all of you beings just hanging out.